Welcome back to PPCM's Painful Truth. Today's guest, Anne Levitsky.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for your time today and educating me on your peripartum cardiomyopathy. I say when each woman talks about this disease, we can maybe possibly put a little of the PPCM puzzle together as we learn. Why don't you introduce yourself? Where are you from? Like what state? And what year were you diagnosed PPCM?
My name's Anne Levitsky, and I'm from Maryland. And I was diagnosed with PPCM after the event in 2015.
So you were diagnosed at a life threat, not during pregnancy.
No, it was during pregnancy. I was in the hospital for 5 days prior because I had low amniotic fluid. And the doctor ordered intravenous fluids for me. And as a result, I ended up having PPCM, but they didn't recognize it until after it was over.
Until after what was over? They giving birth?
So what happened was I went there, I was in the peripartum unit for 5 days and being taken care of. And for some reason, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I kept saying I can't breathe. And I felt like it was damp in there in the room.
How far along pregnant were you? How far along pregnant? You can't hear me? Hold on one second. You froze.
Okay, you're frozen on mine.
You're frozen. I can hear you.
Okay.
Well, we are talking across the world from each other. Okay, I see you now. You're
okay.
Good. You were diagnosed during pregnancy at what month?
I was 37 weeks and 5 days. I was 36 weeks and 5 days.
Okay.
So at 36 weeks, my perinatologist, because I was older and had fibroids, et cetera, went ahead and put me in the hospital because my amniotic fluid was a little bit low. It was not a dangerous situation. He didn't say I needed any additional fluids, but the gynecologist, the obstetrician, when I came into the hospital, he just ordered me fluids anyway, intravenously. And all of a sudden I started, over the days, I felt like it was damp in there and I couldn't breathe. I even had my brother bring a dehumidifier into the room because I have a history of asthma. So I just thought, oh, maybe there's something I'm allergic to in here.
Right.
I need to get this moisture out. It must be my asthma. And so this is day 1, 2, 3. Finally, on day 3, I asked myself, I said, are you going to take these fluids off of me? Because right now you're using the bags to pump the fluid through my body. I was somebody who retained a lot of fluid anyway.
Yeah.
Like I looked about 8 months pregnant when I was 5 months pregnant.
That's how I looked. Everyone always asked me if I was having twins, but by my 3rd month, I had so much fluid swell up. And I'm a very petite girl. And so to have so much amount of fluid, I can't believe, my mom knew, and I can't believe the doctors just didn't connect it. Cause I know I was the type that you could see it. Some women that I interview, they had 0 signs, no fluid. And until you were diagnosed because of their, near-death experience or needing a heart transplant, or having a heart transplant, that they didn't have any fluid. So visibly, when we have fluid, that should be not brushed off as not a sign, as an alert.
Right. And what made it worse is that
you had it all over, like in your face, in your body, in your legs, in your hands.
It was a lot, but I'd also done IVF, so I wasn't sure, exactly what the fluid was. But the point when I checked in, the obstetrician, because I'd spent most of my visits at the perinatologist, but the perinatologist for high risk pregnancies does not deliver. So I would visit the obstetrician's office, you know, regularly as needed. But this doctor just didn't take the time to look at my records, and he heard low amniotic fluid and decided to give me an IV of fluid for 2 days.
You froze. Oh no. You froze. You there?
I can't hear you.
I can hear you now. Hello? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah. Let me just keep
Okay, I
talking.
can see you now. Yeah, I'm gonna have my husband. I'm just gonna tell him I'm gonna put it on the board. We need to edit this. Or he sometimes likes it live. He does. He's like, no, that's great. He's like, he likes when things happen. He's like, because it's real life, but at the same time, I'll tell him. But so yeah, you were talking about about the fluid.
Yeah. So then finally on the third day, I asked them, can you take these fluids off me? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me.
It's gotta be, I don't know what's wrong with, do you have weather there today?
You know, I was getting breathing treatment from a respiratory therapist.
Okay. Oh no, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I needed
me?
oxygen. I mean, I'm advocating for myself in the best way that I can. I asked them to stop the fluids. So I've done all this advocacy for myself, and I'm,
right,
you know, not a doctor. So the fourth day, I couldn't even breathe.
Oh no, wait, hold on. Hold on. I can't hear you. Hold on, I can't hear you. Hold on, wait, hello? Wait, hello? I can't hear you. I can't, wait, hold on. I just missed everything that you just said. You went in and out. I don't know. Do you have bad weather there?
No. Do you want to try again?
Yeah, like whatever reason, you completely, can you see me?
It's all frozen. Do you want me to try to do the link again?
Try it. Let's try it again because I'm missing it. I don't mean to laugh, but it's like as soon as I get like interested in wanting to hear and you tell the example and then you go into something and then it goes into it again. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can't hear you. And you couldn't see me. Let's try it again.
Okay.
I'll keep it recording. Hold on. Or maybe it's your signal. And I got the part with advocacy, the self-advocacy. It's just unbelievable that women have to advocate like this in 2020. If you could still hear me, I missed if you can repeat that. But that's why I am really, really demanding change for our grandchildren, at least, because, you know, the self-advocacy can only go so far. The listening to us can only save us so much. And there's always one that's going to be, you know, a little bit more, passive and not know and young. And, you know, I personally, it's like, I didn't know until I had 3 cardiac arrest deaths. So when I woke up is when I learned, but I knew the entire pregnancy, and you clearly saw me blow up until extinction, like literally.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just think that there's a huge pressure on women to have to self-advocate when there's clearly a prevention where it could just be applied, and then women don't have to, suffer so horribly and, and possibly die from this maternal mortality when there's a prevention.
Right.
So tell me the story. Okay. So I heard, and I'm sorry that you have to go back and
oh, it's okay.
Clearing my throat. It's just part of like ever since heart failure, I can't get that. But tell me your story again with the oxygen and start there, because that's when everything kind of just went. I couldn't hear anything you were saying.
Okay. So on my third or fourth day, they had to have oxygen to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. It did it again. Oh my God. You froze again. But at this time, what in the world? I don't mean to. This is terrible. Okay. I don't mean to laugh, but this is awful. Can you?
I work all day on the computer. I'm a virtual therapist, so I haven't had a problem today. So I don't know what's going on.
As soon as you said oxygen, I mean, you went quiet again. It's almost as if like this is an oxymoron, or what is it called? It's Murphy's Law. It's irony.
Yeah, Murphy's Law.
Okay. As soon as you said oxygen again, you went completely mute. I swear, I'm not even. All right, let's try it. Hold on. I can't hear you. Hold on. I don't know. Let me see something. Hold on one second. I'm going to just try. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to try reconnecting my other earpiece. So I'm going to just try seeing if I just refreshed mine. So I'll see if it's on my end. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hold on. Okay, you're on mute. Let me see. Ask to unmute. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Wow,
Is this
so
better?
much way better. I don't know, what was that connection before?
No, I think that I needed to update my browser because I don't use this platform. I use Google Meet. So, I mean, I can start all over at the beginning.
Yeah, no, please do, because
Okay.
I was very interested in, it was almost as if like, I didn't know, I kind of also laugh at like awkward moments. Like it's just, if something's even like horrible, I'll like, I don't know why I have like an awkward way of handling. So, but it was like almost as if like every time you said oxygen, the next word you were mute. And then I asked you to do it again and it happened again. And then it was like it was like all the important words that needed to be said, you were mute. And then you would be clear with the little words, that would lead you to the good stuff, and it was like, then you were mute again. It was unbelievable. Okay. So take two on this, with, why don't you start what before that led up to the oxygen?
Yeah, I mean, I can start at the beginning and just say, hi, my name's Anne, and I'm from Frederick, Maryland. I'm 46 years old, and I was diagnosed with PPCM in 2015 after it happened. So the day after my child was born. So I had a pretty high-risk pregnancy, so they put me into the hospital at 36 weeks. I had low amniotic fluid, but it wasn't dangerously low. They just wanted to try to keep me there for 37 weeks to have the baby. It's like that was their magic number. The doctor, when I went in, obviously didn't look at my chart, and he started giving me intravenous fluids. And I already had tons of swelling since I got pregnant, basically. But I had done IVF, so I wasn't sure, what the swelling was all about.
Sure.
So he started giving me intravenous fluids, and I started feeling like the whole hospital room was damp. I had my brother bring a dehumidifier to the room because I felt like I couldn't breathe. This is day 1 or day 2. I thought it was my asthma. they started giving me breathing treatments with a respiratory therapist.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, had trouble breathing. Finally, on the second day, I had to ask them to stop doing the fluids, because they're, giving me the IV, because they were pumping the things on my legs to try to get the fluid to move. And I don't know why. I was like, why are you adding fluid to my body?
Well, that's what they did to me. They induced my cardiac arrest, which is what I was told, by giving me that IV 7 days later. 7 days later, before I went in with 104 temperature. I was completely swollen. They gave me an IV fluids, and then when I woke up from cardiac death, they said that the fluid is what induced my cardiac, because it was just fluid on top of fluid. So
yes.
Common sense, you would think, but they didn't. So
yeah, they induced my cardiac event as well.
Right.
And I was in their care for 5 days when this happened. I never left. I was in their care. So by the fourth day I was in the hospital, I needed oxygen to go to the bathroom. I couldn't walk. I couldn't breathe. By the fifth day, they were asking me to do the meter where they measure how far you can blow, and I could barely blow it up this much.
Yeah, I did the same thing. Yep, I remember that.
And I was sitting here, I was sitting wide trying to spread out my lungs. And I had wonderful nurses in the peripartum unit. And they came in, and you could tell they had been crying. And they had an emergency treatment team meeting about me, where they asked the doctor to please deliver me. I had to have a C-section anyway, because I had a complete placenta previa. So I already knew I was having a C-section. Mm-hmm. My perinatologist said even at 36 weeks, my baby was already 6 pounds. Mm-hmm. Like, it would be fine. And they said, please deliver the baby today. Anne can't breathe. And the obstetrician just happened to be the same one that ordered the fluids, said, absolutely not. I will not let her have that baby until Monday. This was Saturday. I will not let her have that baby till Monday. So for 2 days, he risked my life for 2 days.
And the babies.
And the babies, for sure. So what happened was, on the fifth day, when I wasn't breathing, I didn't know what to do. After the emergency treatment team meeting, I was making phone calls myself to my perinatologist office. And of course, my doctor was on vacation. Right. So the guy who was standing in just said, I just trusted what the OB said.
Right, because it's always their word of listening over the actual person who has the pregnancy, the woman.
Right.
Which is, at this point, that's why it has to go further with having the NT-proBNP test being mandatory and the EKG. Most women that are diagnosed with this disease, it's from the EKG, or because they've woken up from cardiac death like myself, or, at a life threat in the ER. Mm-hmm. So what I say is, what we don't know can hurt us. And now that we do know that the NT-proBNP test and an EKG can determine early diagnosis that can prevent, for you to have suffered that much. I suffered for 3 months. It got so bad. I'm normally 105, 110 pounds my whole life. I've always worked out. To when I finally coded, I was over 213 pounds.
Wow.
And over 40 to 50 pounds of fluid was removed. Now, I'm only 5 feet, so you can only imagine how huge I was. Right. So when I came out of the coma, I deflated, and I have pictures where I have side by side to show how my doctors made me feel like, I was overweight. It was my fault, blah, 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 just not having any awareness of PPCM. And they did pretty much they didn't keep testing, it was bad. So to be swollen like that, and you saying during your pregnancy at, 36 weeks, is too long, when it could have been diagnosed around 10 weeks, which is really frustrating for, all of our all of us, because we, you know, we could have avoided, you know, not just the physical trauma, but the actual, like, you know, mental, which is even sometimes even more paralyzing.
Absolutely. So, so finally, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was making phone calls for myself.
Sure.
I was asking for breathing treatments myself, and I had no idea. I've never heard of PPCM. I'm not a doctor. My degrees are all in arts, not sciences. And even my husband, who is an engineer, I mean, he doesn't know. So even my nurses, who are, you know, do know science, who advocated for me to go ahead and deliver, this doctor still refused to deliver based on his idea that it has to be at 37 weeks, even though my perinatologist said my child was already healthy and could be born at any time. So after that, I mean, I was in despair because I could not breathe at all.
Right.
So I had hired a doula to help me just along in the process. And so what I did was I called my doula and I said, I can't breathe. That's how I talk. I don't know what to do. And she said to me, you're already a mother. You already know what to do. And so right then and there, I pushed the call button and I said, I said, I can't breathe. And so that set off an alarm, and a bunch of people came in my room, like 30 people. And they just stood there. And they said, well, what's wrong? And I said, I can't breathe. And they said, well, you're having a panic attack. I said, I'm a therapist. I don't have panic disorder. I can't breathe. And I said to them, are you going to stand there? And so they gave me the oxygen mask, moved me from the chair over to the bed, and then that was it. I coded after that. I went into complete cardiac arrest. The whole hospital went on lockdown. It was so what happened I had a C-section with no anesthesia. I had no anesthesia. I was being resuscitated at the time that my daughter was being cut out of me. So the anesthesiologist had a bag on my face. Somebody else was doing chest compressions, and the obstetrician was cutting the baby out of me. So that's what happened. I woke up the next day in the ICU. I had been intubated. They were pulling the tube out. And I remember they said to me, well, how does your incision feel? And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, you had a baby last night. I had no idea that I'd had a baby. I had no idea of anything. And so that day I was in the ICU, and I said to the doctor, the ICU doctor, I said, when can I see my baby? He said, not today. I said, oh yeah, today. Because the hospital, the whole hospital was they realized there was a lapse in care. So
well, what
they
hospital?
This was at Frederick Hospital.
Frederick Hospital in Maryland?
Yeah, it's a hospital in Maryland. So every doctor that came in to check on me, and everyone that came to check on me, the nurses and everything, said, how are you? You know, how are you feeling? And the obstetrician, do you know what he said? He said, you told me you felt okay at 1 o'clock. The person that caused the whole event by ordering the fluids and then by refusing to deliver, he wanted to make sure that he did not, have any culpability. He was already concerned about it.
Who's this doctor? What's his name?
It's from Capital Women's Care. His name is Dr. Brian Heyman. And it's a big group here, and his wife works there as well. And it's rare that you would have the same doctor the day you check in and the day, it's rare because they all rotate through and there's a lot of doctors. Sure. But so after I left the ICU, they took me to the cardiac care unit. And of course, my husband and parents came in. my husband had been there during the whole event, but of course they took me to the operating room, so he didn't see what happened. But there's a period in time when my husband didn't know if he had a wife. He didn't know if he had a child. He didn't know if he had a child with no wife. He didn't know. So that's been really hard for him because he couldn't call my parents because what am I going to say? I had to wait and find out. So people at the hospital sat with him, but anyway, so that I went to the cardiac care unit, and my parents and my in-laws and my husband said, well, we're going to wait for you to see the baby. I said, no, you go right now. No, you go be with the baby right now. And so, I need you to, and she couldn't be held at that time. So I later learned she was born with an APGAR score of 3. She had to be resuscitated. She had to be on oxygen. I had coded for 2 minutes. I was gone for 2 minutes. A little later that day, the anesthesiologist came in my room in the cardiac care unit from before, the day before, and you should have seen his face. He looked as white as a ghost.
Well, yeah, because if he acted sooner, he would have prevented, a possible, something very, it could have got a lot, if he acted sooner and he
this was the anesthesiologist. He didn't know any of this was going on.
Right. But your obstetrician.
Oh yeah.
If he had to have known just from, common sense as like a person that
right.
if he listened to you when you said something, he could have prevented possible threat to you and your baby.
Absolutely.
And because he didn't, this Dr. Brian
Heyman,
is in complete negligence with zero responsibility, probably. I mean, hopefully he came back and said to you, I'm so very sorry.
No.
And there's zero respect there as well for women who survive maternal mortality, saying they cannot breathe. Now, I called my obstetrician, my doctor, and shame on me because she was in Hawaii with her husband. And I told her I couldn't close my hands. My hands were so full of fluid, I couldn't close them. And it hurt. It was painful. And I just was in pain everywhere. I was in pain in my face. I was in pain everywhere. And she said that was like normal. And, even after the fact, when I came back from cardiac death and I said to her, you killed me and I'm here to educate you. And she was like not wanting to be educated or to be informed. She wanted me out of there as quickly as possible. And same with the hospital, which is what's been happening for the last 30 years to women. We are pushed aside. We are blown off. We are not taken seriously when we are in fact dying. And they're saying that we're having anxiety. Shame on the ones who can't own up to it and just say, you know what, let's learn from this. Let's take this as informative information and let's do something about it. Instead of that, nobody has decided to ever step forward. No one, not any association that has millions of dollars, they have not stepped up. No one has stepped up.
Right.
Really. And so I've noticed this, and it's just, I have women that I've been interviewing from like 1992, one from 1987. And, these women are coming out and they're saying, I've worked with the American Heart Association, tried to do this 12 years ago, tried to do this, 30 years ago. And, it's heartbreaking to know this. Like, it's kind of like ignorance is bliss, but it's like, what do you say about that? And how come nobody's talked about it? Yeah, go red, wear red. But it's like, where are we going? Because guess what? movement has not happened. You and I today are developing the movement. It's not a movement yet, but it is being developed because we're talking about it. And that is what needed to have happened 30 years ago or 40 years ago or 50 years ago, when the ER started to find a pattern of women pregnancy, when cardiologists started having a pattern. Why hasn't anybody, not one person, and you and I today are having this conversation where, you know, we are aware of this now, and it's a shame that it's preventable and that we could have seriously have died.
And, you know, and it's awful. And I didn't know what it was. And now when I try to educate people, other people will say, well, you're just trying to scare that pregnant person. And I say, I'm really not. I just want you to know, because I didn't know anything about it. And I wanted you to know you have to stand up for yourself. And
yeah, so, I mean, what I always say is, you know, I rather be aware and prevent as opposed to not, and having the consequences of possible suffering until death. And, you know, it's almost as if, like, and I say this like almost in every interview, like, when has prevention and awareness and something so simple like a blood test and that's so educational be fearful and not informative? And I find it very, you know, especially within the wheelhouse of, you know, layers, like there's not very much support because it's not joyful. Well, guess what? If it's common and it's just unheard of, and the reason why it's unheard of is because the diagnosis is not mandatory, and women are now finally starting to speak up. Just because it's rarely known doesn't, you know, it's not rare, it's just rarely diagnosed.
Rarely diagnosed.
And I feel like at some point between now 2022, we don't live in the 1800s anymore, that at some point between 2022 and 2023, the FDA will approve the SFLT1, which is the cardiotoxic fluid test, as well as the PIG, which is the PIGF, which is the placental growth factor test. It's a kit and an instrument, as well as the NT-Pro BNP test, you know, and the EKG, as well as an echo and a chest X-ray, you know, during pregnancy. And that should be the standard testings. Now, if they're not going to do that, then we're talking about it for somebody to not just self-advocate, but to demand those tests.
Right.
Unfortunately, obstetricians lately have been denying women who want the NT-proBNP test. They are denying it for women, but we have it for cats. So if you, and it's actually at home. So if you go to Snap BNP, it's actually called Snap Pro BNP Feline. It looks like a pregnancy test, which is extremely insulting to all women because we're pregnant and we need this test. They have it for cats, and they go into detail on how it can prevent high-risk heart failure for a feline cat that you can give at home. So yeah, just Google Snap Pro BNP. They have it for a cat. So the thread of creating this concept is there.
Right.
Now, why hasn't anybody? No one. Now they're all aware of it.
I think that hospitals they worry about incurring the risk of a premature child, and so the maternal mortality is completely ignored. You know, we have the highest maternal mortality rate in the United States of any civilized country. It's been this way for a long time, and it's not getting better. It's getting worse.
Right.
It's getting worse.
Yeah.
So
and
I mean,
I also hear that with women that I've been interviewing that are not in America, that are out there in the world, that are in Canada, and they have a less maternal mortality rate. They do have they do check EKGs more frequently during pregnancy, as well as the SFLT1 and the PIGF, which is a placental growth factor, and the NT-proBNP test. They are aware when I speak to them of the test. They weren't aware of PPCM, but they have more awareness. 100%. All American women are diagnosed at the ER in a life threat. Right. But and that stands across the board in any state in the United States of America. It's different in other parts of the countries. And I hear it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there's no way of sugarcoating that our women in America are highly severely suffering. And when I text this to my cardiologist, every time I text her like a death, that one just happened at Cedars-Sinai, which is why I started the docuseries past November. Leah, her father is Robert, actor in Hollywood. And, Cedars-Sinai, they weren't listening to me then. They weren't listening to me after. They blew me off. They blew my life off. I think of them every single day. I'm never a thought to them. But I will come, I said, okay, all right. At some point, because there's zero justice in this disease if you survive it, there's such lack of respect for maternal mortality, of being informative so this doesn't happen to another woman. And the lack of support on that is below lack of humanity. Right. And it's scary.
I have a master's degree. I'm a highly educated Caucasian woman, so I can only imagine what people in other minority groups, how they're not listened to, because I wasn't even listened to. So I know, and that's part of the reason why, because different nationalities have different risk factors.
It doesn't matter who you are. Exactly. I have my master's at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm a licensed social worker. I was a triage specialist. I advocated for others. I was advocating for myself. I'm a very articulate person. What I do for a living in my career, I've been a location manager. I work top TV shows. I mean, I've worked with the best, Spike Lee, James Woods. I've worked with, Cameron Diaz. I mean, I work with them all, and I have no problem of ever speaking up, because that's my job. So when this was happening to me, I was making myself clear. I have all the documentation. No wonder why I have a docuseries, because I document everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of a consistency is, my medical records and my documentation from my medical records is not me. It's it doesn't resemble me. It's not me. My documentation is completely different. But in anybody's say, it would be the doctors say over mine. And I'm saying to them, yes, but I had cardiac arrest death. Yeah, but here it says that you're completely fine. Yeah, but I had cardiac death. So you're going to believe the paper of me being fine over me actually experiencing cardiac death? I was to my husband, how does this even make any sense whatsoever?
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing that makes it so difficult, is because everybody wants to focus on, well, you ended up with a baby, and sometimes a healthy baby, sometimes not. So they just want to focus on that instead of the trauma. And so, I ended up with PTSD, but I didn't know. For 2 years, I was on such autopilot of survival.
Yes.
That I started having all these stomach problems, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And so finally I went to a therapist. I'm a therapist myself. I went to another therapist, and she said, well, you have PTSD. And then she stopped me and she said, if you're gonna sue these doctors, you have to stop therapy now, because you can't be cured of your PTSD if you want. You have to be actively in the disease in Maryland. We have 3 years to sue. Well, I didn't even know I had PTSD until 2 years.
Oh, well,
The
that's
statute of
great. I only
limitation
had 1
expires.
year to sue. I had 1 year. That's why the high risk management at Cedar Sinai in Beverly Hills was blowing me off so like beautifully. I didn't understand what they were, I'm like, how could you be blowing off? Like, and I mean, I even said, I'm not suing. I want to educate. I want
Right.
and I was insulted in every way. They insulted all women that give birth in every way, and they have zero willingness to be educated, which is scary as hell. So,
and what I've heard is even my cardiologist, who I love, he said, well, you're talking about all the things that went wrong, but there were a lot of things that went right.
what?
And I'm like,
Are you kidding? Okay, well, if you want to
because
look,
I'm alive and my child's alive, because that's how close I was to dying, So
You
he's
know
saying
what?
that's what went right.
Exactly. And I think that he would be feeling a lot different if it was his daughter, his grandchild, his wife. I mean, easier said until you're in that situation. Some people just are so disconnected to humanity of not being able to even fathom that, okay, yeah, for me, you stuck a deadly defibrillator inside of me that I had to have removed. It like nearly killed me. But hey, I'm lucky to be alive.
Right.
It's like, no.
I mean,
No.
the day after you give birth, my perinatologist came home from vacation and said to me, "Promise me you're never going to have any more children." The next day, after I just had my first child,
It's unacceptable because you know what?
Everything was taken from me. My birth experience, my chance to have more children, everything was taken away from me that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they want to
absolutely.
say, and I do have a beautiful daughter, but my daughter has developmental issues that I've had two different professionals, a psychologist at the University of Maryland and another occupational therapist, who have both related it to her birth. She has sensory issues. She has a sensory processing disorder, ADHD, and anxiety, and they related all to her birth because of how she was resuscitated under the lights, under the sounds, had things poked and prodded in her. And so, it's not just a one-day event. I'm going to have this PTSD for the rest of my life.
Oh yeah,
my whole life was changed
forever.
that day.
And that's what is, and that is something that, like I say, like physically, we might overcome this because, it's not the physical that I think the physical pain I could take. The mental was really hard on me. I was having major PTSD as well, where I was having night terrors at night. And I would hold my breath, and then I wouldn't be able to breathe when I would wake up. My heart would be pounding out of my chest. Me as a licensed, psychologist as well, basically, and a social worker, and I did admit people for medication. I knew at that point, especially after my mom and dad passed away, after 4 months after my heart surgery, because it was awful. The timing was just awful. I knew that because I believe in mental health and because I know the balance scale between the heart and the brain, I went on my trazodone, and I knew just as I would tell somebody else, when you're taking Zoloft, you start with a crumb, and then a week later you take a little more, and then in 2 weeks, and then you gradually get up to 25 milligrams. You stay on 25 milligrams for a month or two, then you take a little more gradually, until I knew I was at 100 milligrams, which took me about 8 months. I stayed on 100 milligrams, and now I'm at the full year mark. I feel so much better. Now, this is why I believe in mental health. This is why I believe that when our bodies are telling us we're not well, we know our bodies. Well, It's the same thing with our mind. Major PTSD can turn into a disease. It can also condition, behavior that is that is not healthy for the heart. Because I think that there is a there's a healing process in recovery, and that really comes with, knowing that your brain is nourished as well, and that fluid in the brain. My father, he had dementia at the end of it. So, I feel like there's something with our fluid in our brains. And I did Google after when both my parents passed away, does the BNP test determine dementia, Alzheimer's, heart failure, cancer? And it shows levels of elevation that can determine fluid. So that fluid is what turns the disease into a disease. But if you remove it or you cure it or you nourish it, it doesn't have to. So also I've learned that these medications lowers the pressure of the fluid, and I, you talk about like when you woke up, you didn't remember, that you even gave birth because it was so traumatizing. For me, they wrote on my discharge papers that I was they said something like along the lines of who I'm not as a person, what I'm saying? And and I didn't remember certain things, and it was because, I was pronounced dead over 30 minutes, each cardiac arrest. We lost oxygen in our brain. So it that moisture, like whatever they did, like, whatever they do, sometimes they do a salt drip, or if you're, depending, if how swollen your brain is.
Right.
And we forget about the brain. And I do know, just because I'm educated along with you, that the mind is, it does get sick. And that doesn't mean that, we're not smart or anything like that. It means we're human and we have fluid in the brain, and that fluid does need to be balanced. I mean, my gosh, like the trauma and the impact that we had to take, it's going to take us never, forever. Right. We would be taking it to the other side. You know what I'm saying? Or this is we are the calling people, though. I do believe that we are the ones that in this era, and it's been going on as long as women have been giving birth, but this is our era that's going to change this and change history. So then this way, we don't, the women with mental health that can be solved is prevention as well.
Right.
This could have all.
Exactly. And that's, to be honest, I didn't even look at my own medical records until last year when I had to start getting my daughter some assistance because I was just too overwhelmed. But I've been in therapy. I did EMDR therapy. And I worked with a really great psychologist, Dr. Nicole Albertson, shout out. And so,
what's her name?
Dr. Nicole Albertson. Yeah. And she's wonderful. And so we worked together for several years to help me process this trauma and for it to play a different role in my life. But I will tell you right now, my body still keeps the score. Physically, I'm a different person. And, that's, so I feel like my mind has gotten better. I used to, after the event, I couldn't remember anything. My friends, I used to be known as being very sharp and having a really good memory. And now my mom friends, they kind of just know, like, if there's kind of a little mix up, it's probably me because my memory is just not what it used to be. Now, after my therapy, it has improved a lot. But, in some ways, I feel like my body still feels like maybe it's pregnant. Maybe it doesn't remember having a baby. I just, it's very powerful. This mind-body connection. And
it is.
So I just keep working on it, but it's a lot of work and it's preventable, and I wouldn't have to do this, and my child wouldn't have to, struggle with certain things if, and honestly, I shouldn't have had to say, take the drip off me. I shouldn't have had to say, push the button and say, I can't breathe. you should know. And then, come back to me, and the obstetrician said, well, you told me you were okay. Well, I'm not a doctor. I'm breathing this much on the thing. What about that is okay?
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a chart. So until people start taking responsibility, I meet doctors all the time who've never heard of it before, and I tell all of them about it.
Same.
And none of them believe.
None of them. Yeah.
None of them believe that I had a C-section with zero anesthesia. They said, well, you had to have, something on your. I said, they had a bag on my face resuscitating me. I had no anesthesia.
When you say don't believe, that's kind of common. I went to in May 8th and 9th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, 2019, after my mom passed, right before my dad passed, I flew to Washington, D.C. to help get the postpartum depression bill passed through with, also with Save the Mommies. And it was a group called Moms Congress, and, a wonderful group. But there, a woman, after literally what I did was, which shouldn't really bother anybody, because the bill is not for PPCM and peripartum cardiomyopathy. That was just a tool to add on why this bill needs to go through, because there are women that are suffering. It was an actual example. Okay. The women there, some of the two women that I went into the meeting with to talk to Congress, Adam Schiff's office in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, were threatened that I was PPCM and said that I hijacked the group. Now, I didn't hijack the meeting, is what they said. I didn't hijack it. What I did was talk about how serious this disease is, and that what comes with the disease is postpartum depression, and it's really serious. So what I did was I ended up, talking about it in a group, and the group had the microphone. Hold on one second. My son is knocking. The group, I don't know, my husband will handle him. The group actually was there, and they had speakers, and the speakers there had a schedule. And the schedule, was very specific. And it turned out that I believe the angels above or whatnot placed me in this one specific spot, because the woman who was supposed to get the microphone was the girl that was standing right next to me, like right behind me. And her name is Alice Liu, and she talked about her experience with postpartum depression. I actually filmed hers. And so here, Christina Turlington Burns, this famous actress who's married to George Burns, had the microphone, and they said, would anybody, like to share about their experience with postpartum depression and everything like that? Me, I'm in production, but at this point, I wasn't even thinking about that they had a script all planned and a chart planned out. And I immediately raised my hand, because I'm not shy, and I grabbed the microphone. As they say, I hijacked it. I grabbed the microphone, and I told them about my experience with PPCM. I told them the prevention. I said there needs to be more awareness, but this is what, women are suffering from postpartum depression from this disease, and it could be prevented. So here I'm talking about it. And this woman, her name's Nicole from MoMA's Voice. So she took my partner Rose and a few other women that I know into a room after I spoke, and completely slandered me and said that what I was talking about was not really real, that it was over exaggerated, and that it sounded very dramatic and traumatic, that I was too dramatic. So thank goodness, not thank goodness, but my husband with the baby next to me, I a stroke and a seizure with by cardiac death, and he's giving me CPR, and by accident he pushed the video, and you can see me dying with cardiac death. And so I have that as proof. So yes, this is very traumatic and dramatic, but you didn't have to go to a room, pull women in there and say that this disease is not real, or it's not as what I make it out to be. I'm not sugarcoating this disease. I'm stating the exact facts. I guess, you know, when I was speaking about it, even, I think Christina Turlington Burns has a nonprofit called Every Mom Counts. So I have Every Mom Counts, Mo Mama's Voice, and the head of Moms Congress, all basically like the woman from Moms Congress was like waving her hands at me, telling me to stop talking, like stop talking. Like she just did not want me to keep talking, not educate. But even after I said it, they just wanted nothing to do with like really moving forward, kind of taking this seriously. And so I felt like going out there, it was such a wonderful experience to be part of what I wanted to accomplish, which was getting postpartum depression bill passed through Congress, which was my whole mission of leaving my son, leaving my husband, you know, after I just lost my mom, you know, I just had the deadly defibrillator to be removed. And it was like I couldn't believe that this was actually my life. And then I was like completely being ignored, thrown under the bus. And it wasn't just me personally. I was like, at one point I broke down and I cried, and I said to my husband, you know, I'm trying to talk for all women. I'm trying to at least stand up because no one's listening. And the women in the wheelhouse, I said, maybe every voice counts, but mine. Maybe mama's voice, you know, all voices count, but mine, you know? And then I started to think about that. So I kind of like stopped what I was doing because I'm like, this isn't working. Maybe somebody else needs to step up and step forward. And I waited about a good 3 years. And that's why I started this docuseries, because then I just kept seeing more girls die. So I just said, you know what? No one's listening to me. I don't care who's listening, who's not listening. Women are going to show up, talk about this disease, and that will be the proof within itself. Right. Because whether or not anyone's listening, or they are listening, I mean, whether they want to hear it or not, it's the truth, which is why I call this the painful truth. Right. You know, what you went through is completely painful and way more worse mentally than physically. And I had a deadly defibrillator removed out of me. I was allergic to the titanium, the metal, the nickel, and it was shoved into my heart. So that pain, I'd take over 100 times more than, you know, like what you talk about, you know, the major PTSD, the lack of, you know, kind of like everything that you're appalled with, everything that you're disgusted with, the anger, all of that, the frustration, it's all valid. It's not like it's not valid feelings. Right. We know this, we're not crazy. And shame on them. You know, now we're in therapy, we're trying to like, you know, climb a mountain with a boulder, you know, and we're pushing it up, and we're never going to get to the top. Right. Because we're never going to have justice. I think within ourselves.
I think what has to change is, I think that, you know, mothers have been seen as sacrificing for their children for so long that they're not, you know, in the medical setting, the mother is not valued as much as the child is. Well, the child is very important, but the mother is equally as important. Right. So until we are valued and viewed as important as that child, nothing's going to change.
Very good point. In El Paso, Texas, that's a very strong statement that I actually witnessed by multiple women that are literally, their babies are baked, needs to come out. They are being sent home because the woman's blood pressure is very high. She's very swollen, but the baby is not at its time yet. It's not about the mother. It's about the baby. Very, very much so. Very high for whatever reason in El Paso, Texas. And that's something that I've noticed a pattern with. But I mean, it's everywhere all over the United States. I mean, women are constantly being sent home because it's not their due date, but they're in fact dying with the baby inside of them.
And I think insurance companies play a role, because I think doctors and hospitals try to meet goals of not having,
Sure.
not having premature babies, because that costs money, et cetera, et
Absolutely.
cetera. But I mean, of course, the babies are very, very, very important. I will never take that away, but they need a mother.
Yes.
They need a mother.
Yes.
So we are just as important.
We are, if not more, because we're the ones that have to guide them through life, and we can't guide them if we're like completely like messed up in the head.
Or we're not there at all. Or we're
not there at all. But like the fact that I've woke up, having, my heart stopped over 30 minutes each cardiac death, and I had 3, is a miracle within itself. And the fact that when I mentioned it to the medical community, to other women, it's not to scare them, it's to educate them. And it's so upsetting that the people that should listen, it's like the ones that need help don't think they do. Right. It's like the ones that should listen are not. The demographics for when I go into the back of my website and I see, or I look to see what countries are watching, or, what's the statistics and the demographics. And, the reality is that it targets men more than women. It's the women in the United States are anywhere from 55 years and up. The ones that watch longer are between around 45 and up. The ones that need to watch it, because this is a young woman healthy disease that's induced. So the ones that need to watch it is from really 16 years old to, I mean, it's like that's as early as it needs to be. It needs to be aware. It needs to be educated in schools. If you're ever going to get pregnant, these are the things that you need to know within your body. And these are the tests that you need to be aware of. And this is what, I mean, there has to be some sort of a curriculum within this disease itself. And even when I left the hospital, when I look at my medical records, they say I had preeclampsia, which nobody has ever uttered a word about that to me. Yeah, same.
That is not what I had.
No.
And
I could have. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's not. And nobody has ever said that word to me. So they need to. The medical community needs to educate themselves. They need to take responsibility. I mean, everybody at that hospital took responsibility except for the obstetrician, who tried to blame me. I am not the doctor. I was the only one doing things for me, except for the wonderful nurses there, I have to say.
Exactly. I know. Well, the nurses are wonderful. I mean, we love them all, because if it wasn't for them, oh my gosh. But no, like I said, the ones that need to listen, the obstetrician, the doula, the midwife, the birth keeper, the birth worker, any type of pregnancy specialist in the wheelhouse whatsoever. And it seems like it's so foreign to them. They're so far away from the reality of where we need to be today. And, that's why I say the wheelhouse, it's like really quite upsetting. I have no problem of, I'm not speaking to, to be careful with my words of who I'm going to insult, not insult. I'm staying true to the women who suffer from this disease. I'm staying true to women that just need to have standards. So any type of I'm not insulting doctors. I'm not insulting the American Heart Association. What I am doing is saying, I'm disappointed.
Right.
Extremely.
And saying, wake up, I'm here.
Wake
like,
up.
It doesn't matter if you don't
Right.
pay attention or not. This is what's happening. And
Yeah.
why
And
is the
been
maternal
happening.
mortality rate rising in the United States and not going
Well,
down?
we're the
That doesn't even
richest,
make
one
any
of the
sense.
richest countries in the world. When we're
That's
one of the
exactly
richest
right.
countries in the world. You know, Canada, you know, we don't want to be anywhere, you know, like with, you know, take the good and the bad, but, you know, our women here, if you don't have good insurance, I mean, even 8 years after their PPCM baby, they're still in debt. And in Canada, it's free. So not only are they diagnosed during pregnancy, but then they also have free medical care, and they're cared for. It's still a traumatic, scary, awful experience. There's no level of like, you know, of a woman who's diagnosed with this, whether you're diagnosed early, and that's our goal. Like I even have interviewed them, and I said, well, that's our American dream to have that SFLT1 and the PIGF and the NT-proBNP test and the EKG and the chest X-ray and the echocardio available during gynecology, and then the gynecologist takes that diagnosis to the cardiologist, and then from there you are treated. How come that can't happen for our American women?
And you would think a politician would want to take that on, because saving mothers looks, you know, on paper, makes somebody seem like a hero.
Straight up, Adam Schiff's wife and Adam were pregnant and just gave birth. Colleen, who's Adam Schiff's assistant, who was pregnant, and then when I saw her, she just gave birth. The entire office was on a maternity leave. And then I come in and tell them about this, and they never contacted me again. They said it would get filed. And, you know, they were really appreciative of the information so they can have it for themselves. They were very, very, very appreciative. But to help others in, you know, Ben Allen in District 26 and Adam Schiff in District 28 in Burbank. I mean, you know, when they have, you know, families and it should have been taken care of then, and nothing came about it whatsoever. Nothing. So, and I even went to Congress, and I even spoke to, you know, people to talk about this to senators. So even the young bucks, the new baby boomers, they're younger, you know, they're interns or whatever they are. Do something, address a concern, solve the problem, especially when the problem has a real practical solution. Figure it out, do what you can do because you have authority, and create change, make things better. So the fact that, again, once informed and not applied is just careless, and that's not fair.
I have heard, and I don't know specifically, that the hospital that I went to has changed their protocol. Now, I don't know. I don't think that means prevention. I think that
you should find out with labor and delivery.
When they see the signs, I had to really be in a better place with my mind before I, you know, could do things like this or investigate that more.
Sure.
I've heard, you know, it's never happened again, and they had to have a different protocol in place. But
So
you know, I do want to explore it more. You know, I still have work to do, definitely.
Yeah, until something happens and then you hear about it on the news, like I did, you know, with Leah, how she died at Cedars-Sinai recently, November 21st, 2021. You know, and she, you know, it's almost as if like, okay, they brushed it under the rug until another one. And then another one, you know, even if it's like 3 years later or 5 years later, like, you know, for me, she died literally the same week that I coded, only 5 years apart. And, you know, I think about, and, you know, I didn't know her, but I think about her. Like, I think like, you know, and maybe we'll have her dad, Robert, who's an actor in Hollywood. I'll interview him. I just don't think it's appropriate right now, just because he's just suffering, you know, and if he wanted to, I'm sure he would have reached out already. But I just think that there's a level of there's like a level of respect that is just doesn't exist. And I'm hoping that come June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I'm competing with Mrs. California to be Mrs. America. And the head or the director of the pageant contacted me by sending me the application and, you know, saying that this would create a platform for you to have a voice. You
That's
know,
awesome.
it would give it a voice. So a little nervous about it. But I think that if I ever can have a chance of possibly, you know, when they interview me, because 70% of the winnings of this pageant is interviews. And so I am going to be, you know, I don't need to sell it. I don't need to pitch it any way other than the keywords that can get my point across, that this pregnancy movement development needs a raft, not a raft, but it needs a ship, you know,
It's a ship. Well,
not a raft.
I thank you for all the work that you're doing. I thank you. And
You're welcome.
thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you showing up, because that's what's going to create the change. I mean, the more women that show up, the more examples that are provided, the more talk, there will be change. If there's nothing and it's just not even, there's no platform and there's no real conversations about this, then how would anybody even ever know?
Right.
You know,
and I think people who don't, they think maybe this is just, you know, one of the things as a therapist that I talk about all the time, when the reason why is because most people don't know about it. So many people don't know about it. So that's why I keep talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like the one of the questions recently. Thank you. I was just interviewed in Utah. It was a clip. I don't know if you've watched it.
I don't think so.
I put it on. I put it on a few. I put it on the PPCM Fund support group. I put it on PPCM Fund page. I put it out there. Oh, it's also on if you go to YouTube and you type in PPCM Fund, that's the docu-series. And so yeah, it's on there, and you can kind of see me with her next to each other, and I do say that exactly what you just said. Very much it's I said I started this nonprofit and docuseries because anybody just even walking the streets, no one's ever heard of this disease.
Right.
One of the reasons,
when doctors haven't heard of it.
Right.
I met a girl who was in a residency and she was going to be an obstetrician, and I just happened to meet her and she had never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, also,
and she just got out of school. So if doctors have never heard about it, this is how serious this problem is.
It is. Absolutely. And that's why I've turned down so many jobs, so many shows. And I thank my managers for actually, they respect me. The men, the producers, God love them. They one calls me always rockstar. They miss me because I'm good at what I do. I like what I do. I enjoy working behind the scenes and, filmmaking and doing locations. And I'm, or I wouldn't have been doing it for over 18 years, and I love working on top TV shows because then I get to read the scripts and I get to meet the people and see it all together. And it's fun, my job is not boring. Let's just put it that way. So I miss it, but at the same time, my heart is not there right now. And I noticed that when I was on set, and I'll mention Patrick Thompson, he's going to hate me for that, but he grandfathered me into the union 18 years ago, and I still work with him to this day. Like, that shows that the consistency of the people that I've worked with, I've always worked with them. We always reconnect. And so, when, I was working on Kevin Hart with Kevin Hart. It's called What the Fit. It's so funny. It's on YouTube as well. It's hysterical. If you ever want to laugh, he's so funny. But I was like, kind of like not professional, because I was handing out swag. I was telling everybody and anybody, because Kevin Hart's wife at the time was pregnant.
Right.
And, I'm trying to like literally say, hey, this is specifically, I mean, an African American disease. I mean, there are more deaths, but it's all preventable. Like, you can literally like be saving lives, and nothing happened, and I got kind of a little bit reprimanded because I was bringing PPCM onto set. And, I realized at that point, my heart is with the women, the Heart Sisters, them new incomers every single day on this group. I sit back and watch, I observe. No one even know that like in November, I was really, really swollen, and I was relapsing. I know it. And so if you watch the episode, I think it was just this past Monday, if you click on it, you can see how swollen I was. Now, this was just not even 4 months ago. Remember, December, January, February, March. You could see the difference between me and then. I had to take my Lasix. I had to, I went back. I changed my medication. I went on different. Like, I know that it wasn't me. It wasn't me not being like, yes, I ate better, eating better habits, but I just couldn't even move. I was just exhausted. And, I didn't post that on Facebook. I didn't tell anybody when this was happening, but you can see it. So if you watch a little bit of the docuseries, and it's not uploaded in order. Monday is going to be where actually my husband, for the first time, he talks about it with Miranda's husband, the one that I just did this week. The two men are going to talk about it next week, this following Monday. But the week prior to Miranda's, was that with Koya? I think that was with Koya. And I look completely different. I'm like no longer swollen. And, it made sense that it was in November because I coded November 25th, 2016. And I am hearing a lot from women all over the world that when they relapse, it's usually around the time that you've given birth, because muscle has memory. Our heart is one big muscle. And that at that time you can retain more fluid. That's maybe when you take your Lasix a little more, you have to take you have to get that fluid out. So I was literally, when I started taking it, I started going like, I paid about 9 pounds of fluid.
Wow.
And I feel so much better, and I work out now. So now I have the energy to work out. But when I was full of fluid, I was like tired again, and I had to sleep again, and I just you couldn't pay me to get up. Like, it was just awful. So when that happens, listen to your body again, because that's when relapse is kind of like, I think, happens with us unexpectedly, which is why I think our follow-ups are also very important, which I was neglecting because I was just going and going and going. But if you click on the YouTube and you click on Miranda's and then click on the week prior, you'll see. And it's not, they're not that far apart, 3 to 4 months. It's not that far apart. You can clearly see I'm struggling. I'm 5 years out and I'm starting to relapse. And I knew it.
You gotta keep up with your appointments. It's, and that's time consuming and expensive and,
inconvenience.
All that kind of stuff. You have to, wear the monitor around, the Holter monitor, do all that. And thankfully, I have mitral valve prolapse, so I still see my cardiologist, but he says, that I'm totally recovered from the heart, the part of the PPCM, but you just never know, and you have to stay aware. And Well, I'm just glad you just keep on going and helping so many people with what you do.
Well, thank you. I'll just keep on keeping on until there's actual change, you know? I mean, if I'm here even talking to people for the next 2-3 years, I'm sure women are just going to keep wanting to come and, you know, talk about their experience, at least finding some justice in that and having it, you know, out there like a megaphone. And then they could just say, here's my story, and push, you know, copy the link and send it, you know, or if you see somebody on the street, you know, or somebody, you could say, here, you know, watch my episode. And that way you don't have to keep reliving it over and over again. And that's kind of like where I was at. It's like, you know, I say it within every interview because it happened. And a lot of the people that I'm interviewing, I don't know, and they do not know me. But, you know, there's definitely a pattern here with us women. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter how old you are, what age, and when you had this. We all say the same thing. We know our body, self-advocate. You know, this is a very serious disease. It's life and death, and it is preventable. And we're all very frustrated. And that's where I'm hoping that maybe this can also change, just by a little bit of respect, change, and you know, just a little can go a long way, I feel.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me have a place to talk and giving me a voice, and I appreciate it.
You're so very welcome. I look forward to having more talks. If anything ever comes up, put it in another interview. And you never know what will arise. Know your baby's BNP. What age she is. Know her BNP number now that we have the awareness.
Right.
And I think that number is the most important, that we have to keep consistent with our children, and let them know and educate them that it's the most important test that they need to know in their body, and that it's their blood. It's not like they're going to the doctors and getting, you know, a flu shot or anything like that. They're not injecting anything. You're actually, you're testing your blood. You're not putting anything inside of you. You're actually seeing, are you good? What's my number? Are you below 99? Are you below 100, 300? Are you over 300 if you're pregnant? You know, like, what does the number mean, and how that can be managed, you know? And I think that if our children know that, then our children will let our children's children know. So we have to start the education. It's our our job to start the education.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Well, thank you, Anne, and
thank you. It was nice meeting you.
So nice meeting you and connecting with you. And have a lovely rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us and listening to the PPCM Fund podcast. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. PPCM's Painful Truth is made possible through the generous support of donors like you. Help us spread the awareness by donating at ppcmfund.com, or click the link below to become a member through Ko-fi. Have a great day.